What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. This episode of the podcast is our preview of the NFC West division for the upcoming NFL season. That is right. We are on the West this week, which means that this is the last week of divisional previews before NFL football starts. This pod is dropping on Tuesday, August 27th. Matt and I will be back on Friday, August 30th with our AFC West preview. And then next week, we're coming back with our picks pod where we're going to fill in all the missing picks, give you our wild card picks to round out the playoffs, award winners, and then the Hughesies, the funny awards we do every year to kind of go over our picks and tease ourselves about what's been going on over the last 5 weeks. But before we get started, just a reminder, you can reach out to us, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. We really appreciate you guys listening. We would love to hear from you. As part of these divisional previews, Matt and I are giving bold predictions and hot takes for every division in the NFL, and we would love to hear yours. Make sure you send those in, fouledoutsports@gmail.com. But for now, let's grab Matt and let's talk about the NFC West. Let's go. All right, Matt is here, ready to preview the NFC West.
Home stretch.
The NFC West, is it the best? If you think so, say it with your chest. This podcast is going to be a test to see if it's better than all the rest.
Well, that's all we got, folks.
That's it. That's the podcast. I was reading Dr. Seuss books to my 2-year-old for about a half an hour before he went to bed. Dr. Seuss is a poet, man. So that's where my poetry comes from today, is trying to copy the great Dr. Seuss. Real quick before we preview the NFC West, Dr. Seuss book power rankings. Number 1, Green Eggs and Ham. Banger. Read Yertle the Turtle today. Strong case to be in the top 5. Dr. Seuss's ABC is my dad's personal favorite. That my dad can do Dr. Seuss's ABCs, the entire book, off the top of his head. And he does often. So probably in my top 5 as well. Rounded out with One Fish, Two Fish, and the Lorax. Bangers.
This is the content that you come here for.
This is, what other sports podcast do you get power rankings of Dr. Seuss's top 5 books? And you know what's going to be funny is that this is going to be the most engagement that we get in our entire NFL divisional preview, where people are going to be messaging me and being like, bro, you left out Cat in the Hat. What's wrong with you? And we're going to get in a big argument about this. But before I cause an even bigger fight, Matt and I are here to preview the NFC West for the upcoming NFL season. A division that I think has a good chance to be the strongest division in the NFL this season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you have at least one Super Bowl contender, a couple legitimate playoff threats, and then we'll talk about the San Francisco 49ers. No, we'll talk about the Arizona Cardinals on this podcast as well and how we feel about them. But undoubtedly, they're going to be stronger than last season with a healthy Kyler Murray and adding Marvin Harrison Jr. So I think the AFC North has had the crown for toughest division the last couple of years, but I could see the NFC West being a murderer's row this season as well. All right, let's start the preview with your biggest narrative. It's an NFC podcast, so you get to go first. What is your biggest narrative for the NFC West this season?
Yeah, will Kyle Shanahan stop being such a little bitch?
No.
This man walks around as if he has 4 Super Bowls already. Remind me, how many does he have?
I believe the answer is 0, and some fans in Atlanta might argue -1.
In the grand scheme of things, Kyle, you have not done shit. So, are you going to get it done or not? And quite frankly, I was perusing their depth chart. Like, I feel like they have less depth this year than they have in the previous runs.
we're going to do the Hughesies next week, the award show after all of our picks. And one of the teams we pick is the Bad Vibes team coming into the season. I think San Francisco might be a contender for that award. They were on the bid list last season with their weird obsession with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
But think about it right now. Like the news just came out a couple hours ago. Trent Williams is now holding out for a new contract. They have Christian McCaffrey, who has a calf injury, who is the most important part of that offense. The Ayuk thing was super weird this entire season. And I don't know, Debo's kind of turned into one of those guys where like, I don't trust it to not be weird for more than a couple months until something happens with him.
I mean, even if it's not weird with him, it's like the guy has definitely had a noteworthy injury history himself. So like, how many games are you getting out of him?
Yeah, it's a weird vibe team. And it's also like, how many times can you survive blowing a lead on the biggest stage and choking away Super Bowls and NFC championships? And like, because this is now 2 Super Bowls the San Francisco 49ers have gone to with Kyle Shanahan as their head coach, where they could have won both and choked them both away to Patrick Mahomes.
You can argue that the answer to that question earlier is -3.
It's a tough look. What did Kyle Shanahan say about the Lions last year?
It was like a pregame question he got about like how the Lions were playing, and he was like, "Yeah, well, they haven't played us yet." And like, you realize that goes both ways, right? You dumb little bitch.
I just wanted to remind the fans why Matt started off this podcast so aggressively calling Kyle Shanahan a bitch.
And like they were literally getting their asses handed to them until the Lions decided to literally not put a team on the field, essentially.
I'm pretty sure that our last NFL podcast of last season ended with the words "fuck Kyle Shanahan."
Yep.
We should have started with the NFC West preview this year so that we could start with the same words. I do think San Francisco is an interesting team to watch because I think we automatically put them in the contender category every season. And there's going to be a season where suddenly they're not. And it could wait until after they have to pay Brock Purdy. But with everything that's gone on in training camp, it wouldn't shock me if this was the year.
I think, too, it's easy to sit back and look at it like, yeah, they went to the Super Bowl last year. And even if you, like, put it into context, well, they still went to the NFC Championship game, even if you think the Lions should have won. I know that a lot of people were kind of sweeping things under the rug with the record that they had, but we talked about it. Like, the way they had played games that season heading into the playoffs, that was not a team that looked confident.
They didn't play particularly good in the playoffs either. They struggled in their first playoff game against Green Bay, sloppy. They were down huge to the Lions until they have that comeback. And then they came out in the Super Bowl and actually looked really good at the beginning, but couldn't put points on the board. And we talked about this on the Super Bowl podcast, is like, as soon as they had those like couple big drives that ended in like a fumble, a field goal, and like a punt or something like that, it was like, okay, yeah, Patrick Mahomes is they're just letting him hang around. He's just going to come back and take this game from them. So be interesting to see what changes are made there. Speaking of big changes in the NFC West, my biggest narrative for this season is, can the Rams defense survive without Aaron Donald? Because the Rams are kind of like the team du jour pick this year. They seem like a really trendy pick for people to be like, oh, well, I think maybe the Rams could not only make the playoffs, but what if they win the NFC West? I heard someone say that Matt Stafford is a MVP candidate this season. I've heard that Sean McVay is the greatest living coach right now. I've heard all sorts of like really cool hot takes about the Rams. But Aaron Donald retired this offseason. One of the most dominant defensive players of all time, maybe the best player to ever play his position. And although he wasn't quite what he once was last season, he was still an all-pro first-team player And when I say he wasn't what he once was, he had 8 sacks and 16 tackles for a loss and 23 quarterback hits, which for the majority of defensive tackles, that's a career season. But for Aaron Donald, that's a down year because this is a guy who's had like 15 plus sacks in a season and like 37 to 40 quarterback hits. But the Rams were already 22nd in defensive DVOA last season. And I just don't know. Like, I am going to compare him to the GOAT. Like, when the Patriots lost Tom Brady, it's just like, God, I don't know how we replace someone that's that smart and has seen that much and is like the leader of your team. And like, I'm comfortable saying that about Aaron Donald because he, I think, is the greatest defensive tackle of all time, or at least he's up there with the GOATs. I don't know how you replace that and how people just expect that, like, oh, yeah, the Rams defense will be just as good as it was last season without literally the best player to ever play his position.
Trying to plug someone in there to replace him is the wrong strategy because no one can. You have to make changes to the way that you're going to run that defense because Aaron Donald ain't coming back. I will say, like, they still have some pieces that I like. I mean, Kobe Turner has been great. Granted, he was playing next to Aaron Donald, so this is going to be a little step up.
This is the thing, is it's like, it's a kind of like a house of cards, or it's like a domino effect of like, yeah,
it's gonna be a who's who situation of like you're really finding out which of these guys is legit.
It's like we talk about with wide receivers when a team loses a wide receiver one and like everybody else has to step up. And now all of a sudden that guy who was an amazing wide receiver two has to be your wide receiver one. And the guy who is the two is the three. So we're going to find out a lot, but like on top of losing Aaron Donald, they also lost their defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Raheem Morris, who was doing a really good job, left and went to Atlanta to be the head coach.
Yeah.
So
well, and you and I kind of loved what they did with their first couple of picks in getting Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. However, how much do you want to lean your hopes for the defense on a couple of rookies?
You mean Braden, literally Aaron Donald Fisk?
The white Aaron Donald.
That's what I called him during the draft because his combine stats were like essentially the same. And I was like, he's literally the same guy. No, but like, so the defense, I have questions. And then this is kind of off topic, but they were horrible on special teams last season. They had a negative 9.2% DVOA, which was 6% lower than the 31st place team. 6% is the same margin between 31st and 3rd. So they were like more than double as bad as the third best team. So if the defense is not good this season or takes a step back in any way, like the special team should be better just by the fact that they literally can't be worse and they got a new coordinator. But I don't know how big of a step it's going to take. So like if you're throwing away 2 of the 3 phases of the game, I don't know how I feel about like you being a really trendy contender pick in a playoff team. But all right, let's go to win ranges, starting with the Arizona Cardinals. Matt, what win range do you have for the Cards?
I worry that this might be our biggest gap because I feel like you're high on this. I have them 5-8. I do see them getting better. Still want to see it before I start projecting them to be a 500 or above team.
Matt, I love Kyler Murray.
I know you cannot quit him.
You know I love the
Kyler. See, you were like I'm gonna blow your mind, and I'm like, oh my god, you're back in on him, aren't you?
No, I am gonna blow your mind because this is not the largest gap we have in win ranges. This is the smallest gap we have in win ranges because as much as I love and adore Kyler Murray, I also selected 5-8. as my win range for the Cards. That's exactly what I had. Uh, I warned Matt that there's a team we're going to talk about this week that I'm going to shock and appall him with my picks. And he thought it was the Cards because I do love the Cards. A couple of years ago when I really loved the Cards, I was right. They were a playoff team. And then I was like, they're now my bad vibes team. And it went south very quick.
Was it shock and appall because it was high? Because I thought that was what you said.
Oh, we're going to find out. There's only one way to find out, Matt. But yeah, I have 5-8. Matt has 5-8. The over under in Vegas for the Cardinals is 6.5. I really like where the Cardinals are going offensively around
Yeah.
Kyler Murray. Obviously we're both high on Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride was my guy from a draft a couple of years ago, and he showed out last season, at the end of the year. They still have James Conner. I like Trey Benson. They're going places offensively, I think. So like I went over the offense first, and I was like, oh man, I kind of do like this team around Kyler. If he can stay healthy, maybe they do some things. And then I went to the defense. And maybe I'm just being ignorant, but I read the defensive depth chart like too deep. I think besides Buda Baker, I did not know any of the names. They were last with a bullet in defensive DVOA last season. And I don't look at that defense and think that it got better. And I'm teasing. I obviously know who the players are, but I think the vast majority of casual fans looking at that depth chart are not going to be able to recognize many of those guys. So
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
they're building. They're building defensively. So
That's
like
generous.
just a take here after we just talked about the Rams defense and the Cardinals defense. I think the Rams and the Cards are going to have a game this season that's like 80 plus combined points. Like it's going to be like 42-37 or something crazy like that when those two teams play.
See, like you say that, and everyone's going to be prepared for that. And then it's going to be like 9-5 or something like that. It'll be like painfully low scoring, but in the most bizarre way.
We'll be on this podcast pounding the table for the over. Like, take the over this weekend. They're going to score so many points. And then it's going to like pour rain sideways. So much so because both of those teams play in a dome is what I'm remembering. But the rain is so bad, the field will flood and it'll suck. Speaking of the Rams, what is your win range and expectation for the LA Rams this season?
I'm going 8-11. Obviously, there's some concerns on the defensive side. And if that doesn't work out, it's hard to consistently win games if you can't play defense. Especially if you're not playing well on special teams. But man, if they get that figured out and they don't shoot themselves in the foot on special teams, like they're gonna be in the hunt to win this division.
I had them just a step down from you. I had 7-10. The over under in Vegas is 8.5. I mean, it's everything I already said. They might have the league's best offense this season. I sent you the bet over the weekend. You can get Matt Stafford to throw 25 or more touchdowns at plus 160 on DraftKings right now. I really like that bet for a season long because it's basically just, is Matt Stafford going to play 14 games?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't even need all 17 to hit that number. But I think one thing that's funny about the Rams that people forget is that they were supposed to be really, really bad last season.
Yeah.
And they got really hot down the stretch, going 7-1 after their bye. But 5 of those wins were by one score, and only one of them was against a playoff team, and it was Cleveland. The only loss in that time was Baltimore, and they took Baltimore to overtime, which at the time was very impressive. And then they beat the 49ers the last game of the season, but I'm not counting that because that was Carson Wentz versus Sam Darnold. So it wasn't a real game. But yeah, so they were supposed to be real bad. All of a sudden they get really hot, and then close out the season really strong and then put up a good game against the Lions. I think everybody's kind of expecting to see that same team. They're like, well, they won double-digit games last season. They were a wild card team, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I think the injury concerns in the offense are very real because you have Stafford, who's been hurt, Kupp, who's been hurt.
Mhm.
Reports out of camp are that Puka Nacua has been banged up this entire offseason. He's kind of switched places with Cooper Kupp, who was banged up last offseason.
Yeah.
Kyron Williams was hurt his first year, and he was hurt during the year last year, as great as his year was.
Yeah.
So they're, yeah. But we'll see. We'll see. We're kind of in the same range. If I didn't mention it, Vegas has over under 8.5 for the Rams. What is your win range for the San Francisco 49ers?
I have them 9-12. I don't see them going below 500, even with their vibes. Not a whole lot of teams really get above 12, and quite frankly, they haven't shown me that they are going to click on the level that got them more wins than that. So,
Yeah, I said 10-13. So I was just one higher than you. The over under in Vegas is 11.5, which is tied for the highest with the Kansas City Chiefs. The roster is still loaded, even with all their vibes. Like, I'm still kind of assuming that a lot of these guys are going to be here and going to play.
mm-hmm.
I think they have a lot of the same questions that we were just talking about with the Rams, though. It's like, okay, so CMC's been hurt, Debo's been hurt, like Kittle's been hurt before. Like, are they going to stay healthy? But I really like their draft. Ricky Pearsall was my guy. Apparently, Jacob Cowing, the wide receiver they drafted, is just like murdering it in camp right now. And Pearsall has actually been hurt and like is going to need time off because of a shoulder injury that's not recovering the way they wanted it to. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But I mean, if Trent Williams is healthy and he's playing, we saw last season what this team is with and without Trent Williams.
Yep.
With Trent Williams, it's a devastating offense that's one of the best in the league. Without Trent Williams, no bueno. So
Yeah.
pay the man, stop the holdout, go try to win another Super Bowl because your window is closing. All right, last team in the division. What do you have for the Seattle Sea Chickens?
I got them from 8-10. I mean, I'm still holding out that little bit of optimism that they'll kind of get over that hump and start to realize some of the potential that I've seen with that roster. But it's hard for me to look at that team, and especially with Mike McDonald going over there and seeing some of the tools that they have to work with on defense and seeing them really fall apart and winning less than 8 games. It's just like they got themselves a catch of a head coach hire that I feel good about. Typically, I would probably bump it down a little bit more with a coaching change, but I like McDonald a little bit too much for that.
So this is my favorite over under of the entire season. Do you know what their over under number is in Vegas?
7.5.
Yeah, it's exactly 7.5 for the Seattle Seahawks over under. I have them 8-12. So I raised the ceiling. But the over under number, I don't know why this team would be worse than last season. I don't look at a single thing unless you really like the Rams and the 49ers and think the Cardinals will be way better. I don't see a reason this team would be worse. The defense didn't live up to our expectations last season, but a large portion of that is because they literally could not stop the run. I was listening to a podcast today where they were talking about how the Seattle Seahawks had the largest gap in time of possession versus their opponents with, I think it was like average of 6 minutes per game that the opponents had the ball longer, which was 32nd. And I think like the next lowest was the Patriots that had like a 3-minute gap. So it was massive. And it's because teams could just run the ball at will on Seattle last season. So I think drafting Byron Murphy, like way later than he should have been drafted, is going to be a huge help to that. And I also think if you have like a lot of defensive talent that you're not getting the most out of, you know what's a really good cure for that? Mike fucking McDonald. The Ravens defense was amazing last season.
Yeah.
And they had guys hurt all over the place and it didn't matter. So the one thing too that Mike McDonald's really good at that I'm excited to see is that they send 4 by blitzing and like drop other guys out. So it's like it's not really a blitz because they're sending 4, but you don't know who the 4 are gonna be and you don't know where they're coming from.
Yep.
And with some of the pieces these guys have, like Tariq Woolen to blitz like on corner blitzes, and now Byron Murphy in the defensive line, like I think it's gonna get nasty up in Seattle. And then like offensively, I still, last season, your bold prediction for Seattle was that they were going to have like four guys, I think, put up 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
Or 5 guys, whatever it was. They still have all those offensive weapons.
Yeah.
So we have DK, we have Lockett, we're in year 2 of JSN, we have Kenneth Walker, who's a great running back, and then you're in year 2 of Zach Charbonnet to mix that in. So like it's an embarrassment of riches around Geno. Tariq Woolen had a down year last season after being an amazing rookie, but the Woolen Witherspoon combo, I'm still all in on that. So
yeah,
I'm going 8-12, and definitely I already bet the over on 7.5. I have 4 season-long NFL bets that I love, and we'll share the rest of them in the next couple podcasts. But over 7.5 for the Seahawks might be my favorite. What is your bold prediction for the NFC West?
I guess it's not really a homer pick anymore, but I'm going with Stafford is gonna finish in the top 3 in MVP voting. I just look at what they have on offense, knowing that the MVP really comes down to which quarterback has put up the best numbers on a winning team, right? On a contender. He's, especially with there being questions about the defense, like he's almost set up to kind of have extra support there for that, right? If they win 11, 12 games with the defense not being great and he puts up 35 to 40 touchdowns and has like 3 to 5 like game-winning drives this year, which is, historically kind of his specialty, like he's going to be up there. It'll probably end up going to Patrick Mahomes because he's Patrick Mahomes, but
at least you can be up there, though. That's the best we can hope for. My bold prediction for the NFC West is also going to be with the Rams. My prediction is that Cooper Kupp triple crowns Puka Nacua this season. So he has more catches, yards, and touchdowns than Nacua. Nacua is going kind of at that 1-2 turn in fantasy drafts. And you can get Kupp like in the 3rd or the 4th round sometimes, depending on where you're drafting. Kupp hasn't really been healthy for a couple of years. The last year he was fully healthy. He triple crowned the entire league and was offensive player of the year. He's been banged up the last 2 seasons, but reports out of camp are basically that like he's rejuvenated and feeling like he's back at that level from a couple of years ago, and that he's on a mission this season to prove that he's still the best receiver in the league. While on the other hand, the reports about Puka Nacua are not so positive. He's hurt. He's been dealing with multiple injuries. It's kind of like a flip-flop of where they were last season, where Puka was doing really good in camp and Kupp was hurt. And last season, when they were both healthy, like, and I say healthy, quote unquote, because Kupp, I don't think was ever fully healthy last season. During the regular season, they kind of took turns being the man. Like Puka Nacua was absolutely killing it, setting all records for like rookie records. And then Kupp's first game back, it's like 10 catches for 158. And then it's 7 catches for 140. And then like it kind of went back to Nacua and then Kupp and Nacua, and like as injuries came along. So I think we get a healthy season out of Kupp. I think he reminds people kind of who he is after 2 years off. And I think that he does it by outshining the guy that's going 2 rounds ahead of him in fantasy right now.
Yeah, I get that people are maybe being careful about the injury risk and all that with Cup, but I don't understand why he's going quite that late. Uh,
Well,
but
especially not with the connection that he has with Matt Stafford. Like, if you think
yep,
Matt Stafford's going to put up numbers this season, then
yeah,
like I'm not saying there's not room for Nakua. I think they could both have really good
I
seasons.
could easily see both of them catching over 90 balls.
Yeah. I could see both of them having 90, 1,000 plus yards and like 8 plus touchdowns this
Yeah,
season. So I'm not even saying that this is like an Anton Nakua thing. But
no.
honestly, if you're like, hey, you could have Nakua in the first or second round, or you can have Cup in the third or fourth, I'm pounding the table for people to take Cup instead. Or take both of them, because I think they can both be good. But who is your division winner, the NFC West? He wants to do it, ladies and
I'm gonna
gentlemen.
do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take the Rams. It's not even anything concrete. It's just watching the 49ers just start to feel like less and less potent. It's a matter of when. Maybe I'm a year early, but like it's coming. They're losing their grip on this division. It's already happening. We already talked about how like when they have to pay their quarterback, like it's really all going to fall apart. Their window is shrinking fast. Uh, and the vibes just aren't right. And so I think it's possible that this is the year where they lose just enough games to not take this division.
You know what's nice? I record all of our picks in a spreadsheet so we can revisit them at the end of the season. And I already put all my picks in here. So all I got to do is put Matt picks in while we're doing the podcast. I'm like, I feel like I have a real high PER on these podcasts. Like my efficiency is peaking here. I picked the 49ers to win the division. I'm not going to let you do to me what you did last season where I picked the 49ers and then you talked me into the Seahawks. I'm sticking with the 49ers. I agree with everything you said, but I think like one more season, the band is all there. And I think they figure this thing out like
Is
in
the
the first
band
couple
all
of weeks.
there?
So there for now. I mean,
Like,
it's August 26th. We're recording this
I mean,
podcast.
arguably their most important player is holding out.
Yeah, he'll be there.
So,
I thought what was funny with the whole Ayuk trade rumor thing is that the
mhm.
49ers wanted a wide receiver back, and that with Pittsburgh, it might have been George Pickens. And I'm like, if you somehow get George Pickens back, I kind of like you more with George Pickens for
Yeah,
some reason. So
yeah. I mean, if I'm
it,
the Steelers, there's no way I do that deal.
no, and
I would rather have Pickens than Ayuk.
I think that's why they didn't do it is because one, they weren't willing to pay Ayuk more than like 26 or 28 million dollars a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And also they didn't want to include a piece back. They're just like, take the picks, and the 49ers are like, no, we're trying to win anyway. But that is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can hit us up on Gmail, fouledoutsports@gmail.com, and you can see our videos on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. Matt and I will be back on Friday, August 30th, with our preview of the AFC West Division, which is going to be the last divisional preview before NFL football starts the following week, with, for some reason, a game on Thursday and a game on Friday, and games on Sunday, and a game on Monday.
I'm not going to complain.
No, there's football. So week 1 of college football is this weekend.
Yeah.
But like the following week, we're going to have NFL football Thursday, NFL football Friday, college football all day Saturday, including Texas at Michigan, NFL football all day Sunday, capped off by Monday Night Football. What a beautiful weekend to be alive. But for now, I will see you soon, my friend.
Fuck you, Kyle.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye,
Robin.
Mom.